All right, so Palantir is moving up pretty nicely in the after hours right now, looking like a 2%-ish move. Maybe we'll get up to 3% by the end of the afters, but we'll see where it goes tomorrow. That might be the more exciting move. That all remains to be seen, so we'll see how it shakes out. This move is on the back of their Q2 earnings release that they just reported just a few hours ago. I'm gonna talk about everything I loved in there, everything I didn't love in there, and what I think it means for the company moving forward. But first, if you're new here, I'm Austin. I'm a co-owner of cloudmusictweet.com, and I'm a stock market investor. And most importantly for this video, for sure, is that I'm a Palantir shareholder, and I've been a Palantir shareholder for quite a while now. It's actually my second biggest position in my entire portfolio. The channel's sitting somewhere around 1,700 subscribers. I don't know if we've hit that number yet or not, but if you're back and you're one of those subscribers, thank you so much for being here. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and click that subscribe button and drop a like for me. It means the world. I appreciate it. And as a thank you for doing those two things, here's a picture of both my cats, Millie and Luna. Millie's the gray one, Luna's the brown one. They thank you for subscribing. Okay, let's get into this. So Palantir just reported their Q2 2023 earnings. These were very, very anticipated earnings. So let's dive right into the numbers. We're going to start with the headline numbers, then we're going to look at a few things that I thought were really, really important to talk about. I can't talk about every single thing I wanted to look at in here because this will be like a 45-minute video, but I'll hit the high points. So first and foremost, this company just recorded their third quarter in a row of GAAP profits on an EPS basis. They clocked in GAAP net income of $28 million, and they got GAAP net income from operations of $10 million, representing a 2% margin. They're just in the process of turning that profitability corner as it relates to income from operations and as it relates to net income overall. So seeing this 1 cent EPS number might seem like a bad thing, but any profit's a good profit. Let's be clear about that. And when a company is in the infant stages of profitability, you can't expect massive, insane numbers every single quarter as it relates to EPS. The reason those GAAP EPS numbers are so important is because Palantir is probably on track to be included in the S&P 500 somewhere in the next 3 to 5 quarters. In order to do that, they need to make sure that the sum of their last 4 quarters before they get included is EPS positive, and most recent quarter is positive before they get included in the S&P 500. So they're well on track for that. I was actually hoping to see a 2 cent, 3 cent, or maybe even higher, 4 or 5 cent if I'm being really, really optimistic. That's what I was hoping to see on the EPS number this quarter. But like I said a second ago, profits are better than no profits, and any profit is a good profit. By the way, it's storming outside like crazy, so if you can hear that, I'm sorry. I don't know if it's disturbing the video at all, but I know it's messing up the lighting a little bit. Anyway, back to it. So we got revenue growing 13% year over year to $533 million, and that $533 million was actually a slight miss. They missed revenue estimates by about $500,000. Is that a massive miss? No, that's a teeny tiny miss. I'm not really worried about that miss at all, but if we're being technical here, it was a slight miss. Seeing that revenue only grew 13% for a hyper-growth company like Palantir is a little bit worrisome, and based on their previous guidance throughout 2021 and throughout 2022, they talked about a 30% annual revenue growth. Some people seem to think that they never said that they were going to get a 30% annual revenue growth, so I'm going to put some screenshots right here from Palantir's investor relations website. In order to get back to that, we'd have to have a massive re-acceleration of growth as it relates to revenue. Do I think it's impossible? No, I don't think it's impossible. Do I think Palantir can do it? Yes, I do think Palantir can do it. I don't know if they will, but if there's a company out there that can do it, Nvidia, I can see them doing it, Tesla, I can see them doing it, and Palantir, I can see them doing it. After that, the list gets really short of companies that can have a re-acceleration of growth to that massive of a degree. We'll see how that all plays out over the next few quarters and next few years, but that 13% revenue growth number is not amazing. I'm not mad about that number, but I definitely would say I don't love it. Total commercial revenue growth only clocked in at 10%, while the US commercial revenue growth just in the United States grew 20%. Between commercial revenue and government revenue, government growth actually outpaced commercial growth this quarter at a 15% year-over-year growth all the way to $302 million, and that's on the back of international government revenue growth of 31% year-over-year. So I like to see that international government revenue growth number. That's cool to see. One of the knocks on Palantir is that they've been so focused on the United States, not only in the government side, but also on the commercial side. But I don't think this is a knock at all. Why wouldn't you focus your efforts on the highest GDP country in the world? Anyway, let's move to the forecast numbers. The Q3 2023 forecast as it relates to revenue is somewhere between $553 million and $557 million. The midpoint of that will be $555 million. And if you take the Q3 2022 numbers and you compare that to their expected revenue growth of somewhere around $555 million for the Q3 of 2023, that would be about a 16% growth on a year-over-year basis. So speaking on that re-acceleration of growth, that's already technically a little bit of a re-acceleration of growth because we had 13% revenue growth on a year-over-year basis this quarter. Next quarter, year-over-year basis, that would be 16%. That's already a 3% re-acceleration of growth. So maybe Palantir is able to do that and get back to that 5-year projected CAGR. For Q3 2023, they also expect 135 to 139 million of adjusted income from operations. 135 million of income from operations in Q2. The low end of that is flat. The high end of that, 139 million, is just a little bit of a sequential gain by up to $4 million based on their forecast. So that's pretty decent. For full year 2023 guidance, they raised their revenue guidance from somewhere around 2.19 billion to about 2.21 billion. So that's a good beat. Any raise is a good raise in this macroeconomic time as it relates to revenues. They're also raising their adjusted income from operations numbers up to 576 million. And then of course they said we continue to see GAAP net income each and every quarter through the rest of 2023. Love to hear that. So now we're getting to the juicy stuff. Palantir's board of directors approved a $1 billion share buyback. This share buyback program gives them the ability to go ahead and buy up to $1 billion worth of Palantir stock with no mandated end date and no minimum purchase commitment. So I'm of two minds about this. Number one, I like the commentary they said around the timing of repurchasing stock. I would not be happy to hear that Palantir is repurchasing stock right now. I would not like to hear that. We're at very much elevated levels from where some people believe Palantir should be. It's very possible we see some pain in the short term. It's also possible we rise nicely. I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball, but as a shareholder, what I want a company to do as it relates to share buybacks is to use that share buyback program to actually basically buy the dip of their own stock. And what this does is it kind of puts a floor underneath this stock, Palantir, and any other stock that has a share buyback program. Because we know as investors that if the stock drops enough, it's going to get to attractive levels where Palantir themselves is going to go buy back shares. That decreases the shares outstanding, effectively raising the stock price, which helps us out in total return, and that's one way that they can return capital to shareholders. And the other way would be dividends, which they don't pay a dividend, as we all know. Let's move down to the statement of operations. There's tons of things I love in here, starting with the revenue versus cost of revenue as we relate this quarter to the year ago quarter. So we know that revenue rose by about 13%. And then check it out right here. The cost of revenue only rose by just a fraction of that. So when we take that cost of revenue on a year-over-year basis, cost of revenue only rose by about 4.5%. That's in relation to revenue rising by 13%. I've seen tons of companies having their cost of revenue rise just as much, if not more than their revenue over this high rate environment time. So this is a testament to the margin story that we're about to see with Palantir play out over the next few years, with that gross profit percentage on a year-over-year basis rising faster than revenue already. So the gross profit number, when we take these two numbers, we get a 15% growth as it relates to gross profit, while we only had 13% revenue growth. So that's great to see. Moving down to operating expense, R&D was up quite a lot on a year-over-year basis, but they did just launch a new platform, the artificial intelligence platform. So as they ramp new products, anytime you ramp a new product, it's going to cost a lot of money, especially if that product is a well-developed product. So I'm not surprised to see that R&D number up, but I am super excited to see that the G&A, the general administrative expense, is down on a year-over-year basis. So many companies raise their G&A year after year after year after year, quarter after quarter. I'm super excited to see that general and administrative expenses are dropping for Palantir, while I'm watching countless other companies raise their G&A expense over the course of 2022 and 2023. Sales and marketing expenses also up pretty heavily, but that also makes sense since they're in the process of ramping this new AIP, the artificial intelligence platform. All that totaled up brings income from operations around $10 million. We already talked about that. I'm glad we're seeing income from operations consistently quarter after quarter. That's 2 quarters in a row now with income from operations rather than losses. Their interest income was also up massively. Look, I can't hate on Palantir for taking a lot of the cash that they have. The balance sheet with this company has always been pristine. Everyone knows that. They have a ton of cash ready to go, and they've taken some of that cash and they put it in T-bills. Maybe they put it in CDs. I don't know what specific income vehicles they have, but they're getting some interest income from somewhere, probably T-bills. And in Q2, that brought them $30 million. If we keep up the income from operations growth, the income from operations is going to eclipse that income from interest, and we'll be nicely on our way to a beastly operating margin. One of the knocks on Palantir has been the insane amount of stock-based compensation they do as a company. First of all, this is not uncommon in the tech space at all. It's very, very much common practice with tech companies. So that's number one, and I'm really not worried about it. But I do understand that this hurts total shareholder return because they're diluting shareholders by increasing the shares outstanding. So I do want to see the stock-based compensation dropping on a year-over-year basis. And that's exactly what we saw. A year ago, we have $145 million of stock-based compensation. Now we have $114 million of stock-based compensation. I would bet that's going to keep dropping until it levels off at a very consistent number. I don't know what that number is going to be, but seeing that drop is nice and it makes me feel good. We just spoke about the balance sheet a second ago. We know Palantir has a historically amazing balance sheet. Two things I want to look at specifically on the balance sheet. Number one, current assets increased by over $500 million. That's beautiful. I love to see it. The other thing I want to look at is actually a liabilities line item, and that's the deferred revenue column. So if you haven't heard of deferred revenue, this is basically money that's been paid to a company, but the good or service that the company is going to provide their customer has not been delivered yet. So Palantir's already brought in this money, but they have to put it as a liability because they have to deliver the product that they were paid for before they can put it as the asset line or they can put it in the income statement. That deferred revenue number is up over 42%. Does this necessarily technically mean anything great for the company? No, not necessarily, but I would bet that that deferred revenue number increasing so substantially is because of the AIP, that artificial intelligence platform. So this gets me excited about the artificial intelligence boom that Palantir might see, which can be the way that they have that massive reacceleration of growth that they need in order to get back to their 30% goal. So do I think this was a blow the doors off crazy insane quarter for Palantir? No, that 13% revenue growth number is okay. It's pretty good in the macroeconomic environment that we have right now, to be honest, but it's definitely below what a lot of people would want to see. And we're really going to want to see a lot of reacceleration of growth as it relates to that revenue number over the next few quarters and over the next few years. That's not an easy thing to do, but I do think Palantir can do it. That remains to be seen. We'll see how the story plays out. I'm happy that they pretty much met all expectations for this quarter, and they raised multiple guidance metrics for the full year 2023, and they said very, very clearly that they expect to be EPS positive every single quarter for the rest of the quarter, which now is just two left, Q3 of 2023 and Q4 of 2023, and the story is strong to get them included in the S&P 500, or at least in talks to get included in the S&P 500. And as we already talked about, that $1 billion share repurchase program that they announced puts a nice floor underneath Palantir, and we know for sure if Palantir shares nosedive in any massive way, Palantir themselves is going to pick up those shares, decreasing the shares outstanding, pulling shares off the market, and that's effectively going to put a floor underneath Palantir and return capital to shareholders by pulling those shares outstanding, which effectively increases the stock price over the long term. I've established this a few times on the channel, but I've actually fully built out my Palantir position. I'm extremely comfortable with how many Palantir shares I have and what percentage of my portfolio it is. It's actually well overweight now since we've had such a nice rise this year. So I'm still going to be a holder of Palantir, and I plan to be at least a holder of Palantir for the next many years, probably 5+ years. If we see any major weakness, I might turn into a buyer again. We'll see how it all plays out. But overall, these earnings didn't make me insanely more bullish. They definitely didn't make me more bearish. They made me a little bit more bullish. But let me know your take on these Q2 earnings. I want to hear if this turns you more bearish, if it turns you more bullish. How do you feel in general about the earnings report? And is it changing anything about your thesis with Palantir? I want to hear about it. Are you an owner? Are you a seller? Are you a shorter? Are you buying more shares right now? What's the deal with your current situation? I want to hear about it in the comments. That's one of my favorite parts of posting here on YouTube, is checking out those comments, even the spicy ones where people get mad at me. So go down there and let me know what you think. Thank you so much for being here, and have an amazing day.